I know it's a tragic situation as taxpayers in the country. Despite people are loaded and burdened with so much of taxes, one after the other, people are being saddled and loaded with another tax, which is the real sad situation is it is an imaginary tax, even though trying to glorify it saying it is an imputed tax. So let's try to understand what are the dynamics that they are trying to look at when they are going to bring this imaginary tax and imposed on people. The imaginary tax, even though it was mentioned in the parliament that they are going to charge only on the 10% of the top income earners and 90% of the property owners will be exempted from this one, the reality seems to be much grave than what they are trying to portray as of now. On the other hand, if you look at, if they are saying, okay, 10% of the people are to be taxed on this basis, house properties will be taxed on this basis. Currently, there are approximately about 5 million plus or minus properties in Sri Lanka. If we look at 10% of that one, we are talking 500,000 houses or property owners that should have paid taxes. Since they didn't pay tax, now an imaginary tax is imposed on them. So what does this mean? 500,000 income taxpayers should be there at the highest bracket in the country. But when we look at the composition of income collected by the Inland Revenue, we know it is only about 3%, which is a very minuscule amount being collected from these high income earners. That shows how inefficient the current approach of the government, successive governments over so many decades, to put a system in place to recover these taxes. The fundamental reason behind these failures is because of nepotism. The politicians were protecting and safeguarding the people who were supposed to pay the taxes. So this led to the collapse of the system. And if the top is not giving, top is not demonstrating the right conduct, if the top does not have the political will to do the right thing, to collect taxes irrespective of their relationships and friends, this is what the country has to go through. So now it has come to the level, the government has run short of options to charge taxes on real income. Now they are going through imaginary income and charging tax on people, which is very unfair as we see it. It is no secret and it's no doubt, every government requires taxes for the government to succeed, for the operations to be maintained. But then the basis of collecting taxes should be not on the basis of charging imaginary taxes, but understand the taxpayers, understand the burden that they are going through, understand the resources that they are dealing with, and over a period of time to broaden the tax net where we bring more taxpayers through that one and allow them to pay required revenue to the government. So instead of doing that one, due to the consecutive failed policies of these corrupt politicians, now they are going to charge imaginary rental on people. Then next if we can look at it, if we pay attention to the amount that they are going to collect it, it's only less than 100 billion in the first year, as mentioned by the professor earlier as well, and about 150 billion in the subsequent year. So it may not necessarily be a large amount, but you can see so much of, based on the government prediction and the messages that the conflicting messages coming out from the government, we can see 100 to 150 billion has been defaulted by these people who should have paid the taxes. Then by adding a new tax, by bringing in a new income into the existing tax brackets, whatever the name that they are trying to bring in by this imaginary tax, it is another income tax on you. It is another income tax on the taxpayer. That is why if you look at the acronyms, it is IRIT, Imputed Rental Income Tax. So meaning, in other words, they are going to increase your existing income tax paying threshold from 36, it may go up to even a much higher number, maybe 40% or even higher, depending on the amount that you are compelled to pay. So this is very unfair, having their legally established thresholds. Now the government is putting an imaginary income onto that one and thereby taking the income up, and people are going to be saddled with more and more taxes that need to be paid. Then it's very important to know, if a current person who is wealthy, but due to various political connections and is not paying any income taxes. Through this mechanism, the wealthy is brought into certain amount, certain type of wealthy people will be brought into this scheme and going to extract taxes, but he or she may be paying a lower tax than the taxpayers who are hard-working people of the country and living a decent, dignified life in the country, will be paying at a higher threshold than somebody, let's say, who is currently not paying any tax through the imputed income tax or the imaginary income tax. If they establish 100,000 to be charged, now he'll be paid, or 150,000 to be charged, he'll be paying at the lowest threshold, whereas a hard-working government sector employees, private sector employees, depending on their business people, will be now charged at a higher rate of tax, which is very unfair. So that's why the fundamental issue has to be resolved first before we start this type of imaginary scenarios. On top of that one, we can see governments, consecutive governments during the last decades have failed to collect taxes on real taxes. If governments have failed to collect taxes on real income, how can you expect the same corrupt politicians to collect taxes from imaginary income? It doesn't make sense. They were not able to collect taxes on real income, now trying to collect taxes on imaginary income. So this is why NPP is opposing to this type of situation. If the tax has to be collected, as I mentioned earlier as well, government needs taxation, government needs revenue, but it has to be a fairer basis and efficient basis of collection of taxation. If you look at, on the other hand, the determining the value of this rental is another question, as explained by the professor a short while ago as well. In the event that market values have been distorted, or not necessarily the fair amount of number of representative properties are not there in your segment, then how to decide the value of this property to charge imaginary rent? It may be unfair in some of the occasions, it may be lower than what it should be in some of the occasions. So our concern is these corrupt politicians and their cronies and government officials may use these loopholes to give advantage to their friends and families while transferring the burden onto the true taxpayer. That's a significant issue which we are not clear of the details as of now, as there's so much of secrecy and confusion out there. Then next item is, we know so many of our elderly parents are living in their properties, maybe in their single properties, sometimes being supported by their children. Unfortunately, children have left the country supporting their parents from overseas. These elderly parents who are now going through their golden stages of life is now forced to pay taxes back again to the government based on a imaginary taxation, imaginary income. This is very unfair by the people. As I said, issue should have been corrected by bringing in people by broadening the tax net, not by applying imaginary tax on people. It is a short-term measure to satisfy the requirements of IMF, but not to meet the requirements of the country. The country needs sustainable measures. Country needs measures to develop the country, increase the income of people, thereby collecting portion of that one as taxes. So this is why we are of the view that this is going to distort the situation out there. And it's very important to understand, the government is trying to treat the symptoms of the issue, not the real issue. So when there are several issues, you are trying to treat the symptoms instead of addressing the issue. Just by treating symptoms, you can't resolve the problems. You need to identify the wealth, you need to identify the income, and then tax people accordingly instead of going through imaginary taxes by trying to treat the symptoms of that one. Further, it is quite unfortunate that on top of what are the taxes that people have to pay, they have to reduce their spending capacity again, because of the government is going to take another part out of their pocket. The government is pickpocketing, acting like a robber pickpocketer out there, taking money by all means possible from the people's pockets. And we have noted IMF has failed 16 times by bringing schemes of this nature to Sri Lanka, mainly because they were working with the wrong set of corrupt politicians on the ground. This is why we have clearly indicated to IMF as well during our discussions. You have tried to resurrect this country, but you failed 16 times because you tried with the wrong lot. This is a golden opportunity for the people of the country as well. Whether should we continue on this same path, or should we choose this new direction with revived energy and power to reconcile the issues that we have and take the country towards the development. And we have noted certain other challenges that we are not in based on this situation will create onto the taxpayer as well. That is, it will create unnecessary burden in one angle and added layer of taxes on the other hand, thereby reducing the disposable income of people. The approach of NPP, so then what's the solution? Instead of, sometimes people say we only criticize, what's the solution of NPP for this one? As I said, first is to demonstrate at the highest level of the leadership that you are not corrupt. Then to demonstrate that we will have a fair basis to implement, to make sure not a single rupee of the tax money that we are collecting being put into waste, and instead it will be put into good use to develop infrastructure and support the economy of the country. That is why there is a competent team working on these scenarios to ensure country will go through and establish, it will be having a fair taxation system where by broadening the tax net, many people will be brought in. Digitization will be made use in order to take these processes further. So instead of continuing the right thing, they are taking shortcuts by putting burden on people.